0.2% now. 23.35 for an ounce of the precious metal. West Texas Intermediate crude up 0.6%, 79.45 for a barrel of WTI. Bottom line here, U.S. stock market heading for its highest level in a month. Margie Patel is Senior Portfolio Manager at Allspring Global Investments, and on Bloomberg Television this morning, she talked about the outlook for those big tech names.
Looking at the turns in the economy going forward, they still look as if they should have above average earnings. And actually, if you look at them on a price-earnings ratio, they really are not that terrifically expensive for the extra growth that you're likely to get over the next few years.
Patel was interviewed this morning on Bloomberg Intelligence. Speaking of tech names, the gaming giant Roblox plunging after it reported a bookings forecast that fell short of analyst estimates for the second quarter. Right now, we got Roblox shares dropping by 21.9%. Recapping the Dow, the S&P, NASDAQ holding on to gains with the S&P at 5210 right now, up 0.4%. I'm Charlie Pelleton. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
I'm driving in my car. I turn on the radio.
How about you let me drive?
Oh, no.
Who's gonna drive you home?
Honey, please, I'll do the driving.
Drive on.
Excuse me, I want to drive.
It's
It's the question that drives us.
This is the Drive to the Close.
That funky music will drive us till the dawn.
On Bloomberg Radio.
All right, everybody, we are counting you down to the closing bell. Just got about 17, 18 minutes left in today's trading session. But as you heard from Charlie, you've got the S&P 500 back above 5,200, and we're at the highest level in a month. And we've seen equity investors come back in the month of May, pushing that index higher. The expectations are that the Fed ultimately is going to cut rates this year.
This year?
This year.
Okay. We'll see.
We'll see.
We'll see. Let's see what Amanda Gotti has to say about all this. She's Chief Investment Officer over at PNC Asset Management Group, joining us from Philadelphia. Amanda, good to have you this afternoon. It's been a few weeks since we last spoke to you, and I'm wondering if your idea of the schedule for the Fed to cut rates has changed given the Fed-friendly jobs report that we saw last week and what we heard at last week's Fed meeting.
Well, it's great to be with both of you. Thanks so much for having me. Yes, the schedule and the timetable is evolving in real time. It is true that the Fed is certainly hashtag data dependent, and so are we. And so every data point that's been coming through really does matter in terms of when that first rate cut is likely to come in. And I think the reality is that time is on our side. There's patience that we need to have here as it relates to when that first rate cut comes. And so our view is certainly evolving. I think market-based expectations are now down to no more than one cut this year. We're still hanging on to two, likely in July and then towards the end of the year. But as additional data comes in, I think that view is certainly subject to change. I think the risk of cutting too soon is much bigger than pausing and waiting a few more months.
Amanda, really interesting, and I do wonder, having a bunch of conversations with market watchers out at the Milken Annual Conference. I mean, these are folks that are managing trillions of dollars globally. What's interesting is a lot of optimism, but a lot of them also saying it doesn't really matter if the Fed raises a quarter of a point or cuts a quarter of a point. Like it just doesn't matter at this point in terms of our outlook or what we're going to do. Do you agree with that assessment? Does it really matter to investors at this point, really what the Fed does or doesn't do?
So two stories there, right? If the Fed were to choose to increase rates even a quarter of a point, I think it would matter a huge amount for the market. You want to see a market correction, I think that could very easily be a catalyst for it. I'm not convinced it's the same impact with that first rate cut. And it's really because markets have recalibrated to this idea that the Fed is no longer going to raise rates. They are indeed going to pivot. It's just a question of when. And I think, if we go further into tighter financial conditions territory, tighter, more restrictive policy, I think that's bad news for the equity market here, particularly at these valuation levels. We just don't have a lot of headroom to absorb additional tightening in the system at these levels.
What have we learned from companies reporting earnings thus far? Because it's been pretty good in terms of the way that their outlook is, in terms of certainly the way that investors are reacting.
Yeah, I think so. I would give Q1 earnings season, even though it's not done and dusted yet, I would give it probably a solid B. So relative to the last few quarters, we're definitely gaining on it in terms of getting better results here. But in Amanda math, we're still sitting in an earnings recessionary environment. And what I mean by that is if you take out the Fab 5, for the S&P 500, we go from 3.7% or higher in terms of a growth rate to minus 4%. And so there's still this big distinction between winners and losers in this environment. And we really do need to get more of a broad-based reacceleration in earnings. I think that's really much more so than what the Fed does in July in terms of cutting rates once. I think that's much more important to re-engaging this market rally than anything else. And so Q1 earnings season has been pretty good so far. I think Q2 is going to be a lot more telling because our view is that when we get to Q2 earnings season, whether you include or exclude those Fab 5, we actually may finally break that streak of the earnings recession. I think that would be a really positive inflection point for markets.
Amanda, I'm looking at the S&P 500 still up about 9% for the year to date. You're looking at the NASDAQ 100 up more than 7% year to date. Tim and I are here at the Bloomberg Technology Summit in San Francisco, the heart of Silicon Valley, talking so much about technology, innovation. A lot of the subjects that we are talking about all go back to artificial intelligence and how that is affecting or might affect our world going forward. How are you thinking about that as an investment, an investment play?
We're definitely focused on it as a secular investment theme. And I think from our perspective, although there may be a lot of views that it's sort of one name or a collection of maybe 4 to 5 names that are really the way to play it, we really want to think about it more broadly than that because the use cases go far beyond just 4 or 5 stocks. And so thinking about how it can really impact and evolve profitability and profit margins across the entire market and really enhance processes across a number of sectors that are not necessarily technology focused, that's really where our mind is in terms of playing this and the path forward. You have to think about it much more broadly than just 5 names.
Over on Bloomberg Intelligence on the radio this morning, maybe it was Bloomberg Surveillance, but they were talking about, Tom Keene was talking about the way that utilities we've seen a run up in utilities so far this year as this idea of an AI play. And I'm wondering, Amanda, if that's a way that you see opportunity to get in on AI.
So I'm sort of chuckling to myself because AI and utilities in the same sentence sounds straight up insane, right? But I think it's actually a pretty good example of what we mean by use cases. The power of implementing AI and AI-related automation and intelligence can show up anywhere across the spectrum of sectors, and it's really the idea that we're just going to enhance processes no matter where that shows up. So it could be in the financial sector, it could be in the utility sector, it could be in staples. It isn't really concentrated in tech, and so I think that makes a huge difference in terms of the trajectory for profitability and profit margins going forward. But it's not just a 2024 story, it's much more extended than that.
All right, so if you had to kind of think about the one risk you think investors at this juncture should have on their radar, what is it? Is it geopolitics? Is it the rate environment? Is it something else?
I think I would go, I mean, there's a lot of things that potentially keep me up at there's a lot of things that keep me up at night. That doesn't mean I feel overly bearish in this environment, but I do think the geopolitical tensions and the conflicts that are ongoing are the thing that may ultimately, get investors caught a bit flat-footed in this environment. To the extent that one or more of them continue to escalate and evolve, the market at these levels is not priced to absorb potential shocks from a geopolitical event. So that at the moment, I think that is the thing that's most top of mind for me. And to the extent that it shows up in other parts of the world, I think the market will struggle from a volatility perspective in the short run to absorb that.
Amanda, thank you so much. Amanda Agati, Chief Investment Officer over at PNC Asset Management. We appreciate you powering through. We know it's kind of loud on our end, but we really appreciate it. And really kind of connecting, right? Connective tissue between obviously what's going on in the world of technology, AI and other, to the investment world and how that plays out.
Did you get the sense at Milken that the folks there were getting on the AI train in a way that they felt like they were missing out, or that there were fundamental things that they could get from a finance perspective out of AI?
Yeah, but it was a real big shift to the energy use of data centers and powering all that data and building that out in infrastructure play. I felt like that's more of what I heard of, not necessarily NVIDIA and the like.
All right, from San Francisco to Washington, D.C. for a check on the latest world and national news with Amy Morris.
Hi, Tim. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says his country will stand alone if it has to in the war against Hamas, threatening to deepen a crisis in relations with the United States. This after President Biden warned he will stop additional shipments of offensive weapons to Israel if the country goes ahead with a ground invasion of Rafah in Gaza. Biden is concerned an invasion will exacerbate a humanitarian crisis. Netanyahu says the U.S. threat won't stop Israel from continuing its offensive. Some Republican senators say they're crafting a resolution condemning President Biden's decision to suspend shipment of those weapons to Israel. The FAA's oversight of maintenance at United Airlines is getting some oversight of its own. More on that now from Bloomberg's Nathan Hager in Washington.
The Transportation Department's Office of Inspector General will audit the FAA's review of United's operations. This comes after a series of mishaps for the carrier this year, including a wheel flying off one plane after takeoff, a fuselage panel lost on another flight, and an aircraft skidding off the runway shortly after landing. The transportation watchdog says it will evaluate FAA's actions to address maintenance non-compliance and violations at United. The audit will begin later this month. In Washington, I'm Nathan Hager, Bloomberg Radio.
And after 2 days of testimony, adult film actress Stormy Daniels has left the witness stand. Trump's attorney told the judge that the defense will renew its request for a mistrial based on Daniels' testimony and that they'll try to prevent the testimony of former Playboy model Karen McDougal. Now, the judge says he'll dismiss the jury at 4 today, which is a little early, so he can review the defense team's arguments. Meanwhile, the jury today also heard from publisher Tracy Menzies and Donald Trump's personal secretary, Madeleine Westerhout. We've got global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Amy Morris, and this is Bloomberg.
3:40 on Wall Street. We do check markets all day long here at Bloomberg. We have got the Dow, the S&P, NASDAQ all pushing higher right now. Just about the best level of the day on the S&P 500 index, up 22 now, up 0.4%. Stocks heading for the highest close in a month, adding to a rebound that's been fueled by speculation the Fed will cut rates this year. S&P right now, as I mentioned, up 0.4%. The Dow up 319, up 0.8, while NASDAQ is up 35. For NASDAQ, that is a gain of 0.2%. 10 years yielding 4.45%, with a 2-year 4.81%. Gold up $33 the ounce now to $23.42. That is a gain of 1.5%. West Texas Intermediate crude up 0.7%, $79.58 a barrel. Apple shares are advancing 1% after Bloomberg News reported that the company will use in-house chips in data centers that will power artificial intelligence capabilities. And U.S. cellular shares, they're surging 28.5% after the Wall Street Journal reported that T-Mobile and Verizon are in talks to buy parts of the wireless carrier. T-Mobile up 0.9%, Verizon up 0.7%, and U.S. Cellular, worth repeating, up now by 29.1%. Recapping, stocks higher, S&P up 24, up 0.5%. I'm Charlie Pelleton. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Thank you so much for that update, Charlie Bell. I do appreciate it. Tim Sedevik and Carol Master live at the Bloomberg Tech Summit in San Francisco. Well, our next guest needs no introduction, but we're going to give him one anyway. He's a Silicon Valley legend. He helped build PayPal. He co-founded LinkedIn. He was an early investor in Facebook and Airbnb. He was the first investor in OpenAI. He co-founded the AI company Inflection AI. He's on Microsoft's board. He's a partner at the VC firm Greylock Partners. He's a New York Times bestselling author. And he's also a podcaster. We have Reid Hoffman with us.
Great to be here. Thank you.
How are you?
He's the
Good.
GOAT.
Although, as we were just talking, it's the loudest environment we've ever done a radio show before, and so hopefully it'll work.
It's working so far. So far, so good. But I have to ask you, are you the real Reid Hoffman? Or am I talking to some sort of AI digital twin right now?
Well,
and explain why I have to ask that question, please.
So as you know, I did an interview with myself where I was talking to my own digital twin, Reid AI, and I did it in order to kind of show that not only, obviously there's a whole bunch of concerns. There's concerns in political and misinformation and deep fakes and a bunch of other stuff that are real concerns. But even here, there's optimism to look at. Like, what can we shape towards? And I wanted to show, not just tell, that message. And so it's like, okay, well, let me talk to my own Reid AI and see how it works. And so, and the reason why you asked that question, of course, is you say, well, wait a minute, that was pretty good. Of course, we're here in person. You can tell I'm the real me.
This is Reid AI that sounded like you. This looked like you.
Yes.
Yeah, this is like, it looked like you were talking to an
video, audio, and the words were all AI generated. There was zero from me. It was, well, other than mirroring off my earlier videos, mirroring off my earlier podcasts.
You use your book to train as well?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it used everything I've written to give answers the way Reid would give answers.
So are we all going to have digital twins someday and we're going to utilize them? Or like, what's
can my digital twin go to the DMV for me?
Hallelujah.
So I think we might. It's certainly possible. Certainly if you're a media person, you'll have a digital twin. Certainly if you're a leader, you'll have a digital twin. Because it'll be used in a If you're a lawyer, you'll have one, because then people can talk to your digital twin and maybe at a cheaper rate than talking to you, or prepping for your meeting, or that kind of stuff. So I think there will be a stack of areas for digital twins that will be very real. But I'm not sure all 8 billion people in the world will do it.
Well, so why should this excite us and not scare us and want us to all move to bunkers?
So it should, look, naturally, it should both excite and scare us. The scare us is the negative uses. The scare us is political misinformation, things that are going to be happening this year in the U.S. and so forth, and in other major elections and democracies. It should scare us because there's questions around, well, wait a minute, what if someone created a deep fake of me doing something or saying something I really abhor? I think Trump is a corruption in democracy against the rule of law, and what happens when you create a deep fake of me going, I love Trump? That would be obviously a problem. And so there's all kinds of ways that there are real problems. On the other hand, we we will, as we always do with technology, figure out how to navigate, again, not perfectly, but sufficiently, and there will be great things. Like, for example, that's part of the reason I started showing hey, look, here I'm making a deep fake of myself, and it's not that bad.
You know, Reed, when you sat down, I said the conversations we have a lot at Bloomberg, and we've written about this, is here you have LinkedIn, kind of the social media site, not kind of, the social media site that seems to be clean, pure, you can trust it, you can have civil conversations, so we can get it right. So how is that kind of a guiding force in terms of Gen AI and how we need to think about what are the guardrails, how do we regulate it?
Yeah. So the good news is that mostly frontier model companies, Microsoft, OpenAI, Google, are all putting a lot of energy into making these models healthy participants within the U.S., within the global kind of media ecosystem. Like, don't generate fake information, be civil, don't do hate speech, don't enable self-harm. They all put a lot of energy and a lot of work in that, and invest hundreds of millions of dollars and teams of hundreds of people in order to do that. Now, one of the challenges is that some of these models are open source, and as an open source, someone else takes the open source model, something that's not any of that with that. Right. And that's part of the reason why we still have to navigate this.
Do you have trust, though, that we can navigate it correctly and safely in the future? AI?
So the ultimate answer is absolutely yes.
Okay.
That doesn't mean that there aren't potholes, bumps in the road, fender scrapes, all the rest. I guarantee you there will be those too.
The U.S. can't get Vladimir Putin not to invade Ukraine. The world can't get him not to stop fighting there. What convinces you that we could get a leader like him not to use AI for bad?
0%. Like, if you said that that Putin will be using AI to disrupt the U.S. elections, probably support Trump because that's his exit strategy from Ukraine, he will do that. 100%, there's no way of stopping it. The defense is not getting him not to do it. The defense is integrating AI into our own tech platforms and using our stronger AI in defense.
So essentially saying, okay, well, maybe you see something on Facebook and Meta platforms might have developed something that says, okay, well, this isn't necessarily something that's true.
Yes.
A disclaimer.
But do you trust Facebook to do that?
There's been some issues so far,
Yes.
And you have a deep history with the company.
Yes, I have a deep history with the company. I actually have talked to Zuckerberg about it. They're investing in it. I think they're making a real effort at it. So I think they're really trying. I'm more worried about Twitter than I am about Facebook on this matter.
Okay, why are you more worried about Twitter?
Well, because look,
Elon Musk is someone you also go way back with.
Yeah, and look, Elon is literally one of the heroes of our generation. Space and kind of Starlink and Tesla and EV, just amazing. We wouldn't have any of this without him. It is so spectacular. On the other hand, before he buys Twitter, he's like, oh, we have this problem with robots. And then after he bought, before trying to get out of the deal, and then after he buys, oh, what robots? And you're like, well, the robots are still there. There's still Internet Research Agency, Russian robot farms doing shit. Are you doing anything about them? I'm not hearing anything.
To be fair, I did see an ad on Twitter recently with a deep fake of Jeff Bezos pushing a cryptocurrency.
Yes.
And it's a paid ad that has showed up repeatedly in my feed. Obviously not approved by Bezos.
Yeah. And so therefore, what are you doing about AI and robots?
Well, Elon is so complex. Back from Milken, he did a conversation with Michael Milken. He said very important to have maximum truth-seeking AI and maximum curious AI, and that it's taught not to lie nor do things that are not true.
Yeah. Well, walk the walk, don't just talk the talk.
Well said, well said. Can I ask, I'm always curious, as we have all these conversations about Gen AI, how is it going to impact my life? How is it really going to impact Tim's life? How is it really going to impact your life?
So here's a simple way of looking at it. All of us are going to have a personal AI assistant that is going to be helping us with its focus on us, right? So it'll be like, hey, what do you need help with? Do you need help with figuring out, say, something light, like where to go, what entertaining to do, in the city tonight? Or, oh, I'm having this, I'm trying to figure out this thing with my kid. Oh, we can help you with that. Oh, I'm trying to figure out this medical thing. Oh, I can help you with that. Oh, I'm trying to figure out, I had this difficult conversation with a coworker. Oh, I'll talk to you about that. It will help us with a whole range of things. And like, for example, part of what we found at Inflection was really surprising to us and very positive, which does Pi in personal intelligence, is people will say, oh, I got these 8 ingredients in my fridge. What should I make? Or, oh, my toaster broke. Can I fix it? And you're like, actually, in fact, it helps with all of that. So it's that human amplification that's helping us navigate our lives, which is the thing I guarantee will be there.
I love the ingredients in the fridge part of it. Hey, if you're just joining us, we're speaking with Reid Hoffman of PayPal, of LinkedIn, of OpenAI, of Inflection AI, of the podcast Possible. The list certainly goes on. Reid, I'm wondering about winners and losers when it comes to AI in terms of companies. You're on the board of Microsoft. I mentioned a couple of the big companies that you've invested in, that you founded. Is there a concern that we're just going to see the big companies like Microsoft, like NVIDIA, like Amazon, like Meta Platforms, they're going to be the only winners when it comes to AI?
What I guarantee you is they're not going to be the only winners. They will be winners, right? Satya has just done a masterful job. Remember, it started with a $1 billion deal with a 501c3. I think it's the first time in history that something like that's happened. Like, genius strategy from Satya, and I think it will be, across all of these companies. I think they will have strong wins going into the future. On the other hand, at Greylock, we're investing in a whole bunch of AI companies. We do it reasonably well. We have the whole portfolio that we're excited about. And I think that it's just you don't play the same game. It's a little bit like if you said, hey, I've got a startup. I'm going to try to make a new desktop search company. You're like, well, that's kind of difficult, right? There is this company called Google. It's a little challenging.
Doing okay.
Or I'm going to make a new handset mobile phone device. You're like, there's this company called Apple. It's a little challenging. So, you don't do it that way, but there's going to be a whole range of other AI companies. Things that will, like, everything from opportunities that the large tech companies just can't focus on, to taking interesting risks and making that risk look good, and then all of a sudden building out interesting companies. So I think there's going to be a range of startups that will excite and delight us.
We love podcasts. We have a great podcast. You have a great new podcast. Tell us about Possible.
Thank you very much.
Well, tell us about it. Like, who you want to talk to? What are the conversations you want to have?
So for me, with Possible, it's too much of the dialogue is about technology being dangerous to us. How we evolve as humanity, how we become better and more human is through technology. It's clothing, it's glasses, it's food, it's cooking, it's fire, it's buildings. All of this is technology that's helped us make us as the human beings we are. AI will be the same, and the whole point of on the Possible podcast is to say, this is how technology can help us become more human. Not to go, oh my God, what's coming in technology? It can be great for us, and it's not that hard to shape. We just need to shape it. Whether it's AI, whether it's the use of phones, and obviously people like to talk about what social networks, and they go, wow, like that's been kind of challenging. It's like, well, look at LinkedIn. LinkedIn's worked out pretty well. It's doable. So let's do it.
Reid, I want to end with something that everybody loves to talk about: politics.
We all agree, as you know.
Look, you've been open about your feelings about Donald Trump. You helped fund E. Jean Carroll's defamation lawsuit against the former president. There are a lot of business leaders out there, some of them people you work with very closely, who say that business under a President Trump administration was better than business under a Biden administration, and that's why we're in the corner of Donald Trump when it comes to 2024. What do you say to them?
So I understand the approach that Trump is more regulatory lightweight than Biden. And by the way, generally speaking, being more regulatory lightweight is a good thing. I try to encourage the Biden administration to do that. On the other hand, what's more fundamental is the rule of law. Business works much, much better with a healthy, strong rule of law. We do not want to have leaders who are literally in a court, like have been convicted by a court of you were slandering about your sexual assault, and a jury found you guilty, right? We should be a rule of law country first. And by the way, this is what the business leaders, by the way, rule of law is what makes great business. That's the reason why actually Biden is a better president for business, even though the regulatory thing won't be exactly what you want, and we'll have to work on it. But rule of law is fundamental.
And to be fair, your perspective, your point of view.
Yes, my mind. Yes, business.
But I do wonder that, so as you look at the November election, that outcome, if it is not another Biden White House, if it's President Trump, former President Trump back in the White House, what does it mean for the tech industry or your view in terms of if the rule of law is not followed?
Well, so, look, I think the tech industry can thrive under either administration. But I do think that if...
They've lived through a Trump White House
either Biden or Trump. But if I think Trump's elected, I think history will look back as the beginning of the end of the American world order. And that will have a massive effect on global business.
How far are you willing to go to re-elect Joe Biden?
Well, I'm willing to invest. I'm willing to speak. I'm willing to campaign. I'm willing to try to, when a prominent business leader speaks up and says, I'm pro-Trump, I call them. And I say, let's talk about it.
Do you ever change their mind?
Oh, of course. Look, for example, one of the things you have to do is think about blind spots. Like, I just said something that was positive about how Trump's administration was running. Like, it's right to say, you want a new regulation? Remove an old one. It's an exactly right thing.
But I think what you said about globally, the perception of the rest of the world, potentially on what the U.S. means and what it is in terms of doing business, that's a bigger story.
Yeah. People will not trust us. They will say, we now no longer trust that you're into the rule of law, an equal system, all the rest.
All right, if we weren't in a world where Gen AI was everything, 20 seconds, what's the other technology we should have on our radar, real quickly?
Well, so the other thing that's following behind it is synthetic biology, and when you put them together, by the way, like the invention of new pharmaceuticals, new medicines, everything else, it's like, let's just hold on to get to the future, because the future can be so amazing.
You do think about what AI can do, right? In terms of playing around with molecules. Thank you so much.
A pleasure.
Thank you for enduring.
My pleasure.
We so appreciate it. Reed, thank you so much.
That's Reid Hoffman of PayPal, of LinkedIn, a Silicon Valley legend.
He's a Silicon Valley goat. Can we say that?
New York Times bestselling author. His podcast,
The
Possible Podcast, Season 2 started. It's out now.
Love it, love it. All right, folks, you are listening and watching Bloomberg Business Week. We're live at the Bloomberg Technology Summit in San Francisco. More to come. We're also got the market close coming your way in just a moment. I'm Carol Master, along with Jim Standenbeck. We are Bloomberg.
It's 3:58 on Wall Street. We do check markets all day long here at Bloomberg. Just ahead of the closing bell, we have got the Dow, the S&P, NASDAQ all advancing, and not just advancing, the stock market on track to its highest level in a month, adding to a rebound that has been fueled by speculation that the Federal Reserve will be cutting interest rates this year. Amanda Agati is Chief Investment Officer at PNC Asset Management Group, and right here on Bloomberg Business Week, she urged patience with the Federal Reserve.
It is true that the Fed is certainly hashtag data dependent, and so are we. And so every data point that's been coming through really does matter in terms of when that first rate cut is likely to come in. And I think the reality is that time is on our side. There's patience that we need to have here as it relates to when that first rate cut comes. And so our view is certainly evolving.
Amanda Agati of PNC. And speaking of data points, equities rose as higher than estimated jobless claims reinforced bets on Fed policy easing, with the market also climbing after a $25 billion sale of 30-year bonds saw good demand. The S&P 500 index will close above 5,200, though trading volume today about 20% below the average of the past 30 days. So ahead of the close here, we've got stocks advancing, the Dow, the S&P, NASDAQ all finishing solidly in the green. Gains in stocks also been attributed to commodity trading advisors who surf momentum, being modeled to buy shares this week. Right now, S&P up 26 to 52.13, a gain there of 0.5%. And there you have it, sound of the closing bell at the New York Stock Exchange, with the Dow up 336 points, a gain there of 0.9% at the bell. NASDAQ Composite Index up 43, up by 0.3%. 10-year yield 4.45%, with a 2-year that's yielding 4.81%. Spot gold today up $35 the ounce, up 1.5%, 23.44. And West Texas Intermediate crude up 0.8%, 79.60 for a barrel of WTI. The SEC is scrutinizing statements that Boeing made about its safety practices following a near tragic accident in January aboard one of its 737 MAX 9 planes. Also today, Airbnb shares slipped the most in a year after the home rental company gave a lackluster guidance for a second straight quarter. Recapping, stocks higher, S&P up 26, up 0.5%. I'm Charlie Pellet, and that is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
This is Bloomberg Business Week. Insight from the reporters and editors who bring you America's most trusted business magazine. Plus, global business, finance, and tech news as it happens. Bloomberg Business Week with Carol Masser and Tim Stenevec on Bloomberg Radio.
Yes, indeed, everybody. Bloomberg Business Week. Carol Masser along with Tim Stenevec. We're live in San Francisco at the Bloomberg Technology Summit. And, you know, it's too bad we don't, if somebody only had like an environment where all you did was talk about Elon.
Oh, yeah, okay. Well, fortunately, we have one.
Oh, yeah, we do. The Elon Inc. podcast. Yeah, listen, there's so much going on when it comes to Elon Musk. It's hard to keep up every day with all his properties. And we have one of the great voices behind it, our own Max Chafkin, who is here at the Bloomberg Technology Summit. I mean, it is really hard to keep up with all things Elon.
Well, yeah, I mean, especially now, he's as we're going to talk about today, he's really making some moves in AI, both with Tesla and with XAI, his sort of competitor to ChatGPT, and, obviously the Neuralink news that has come out over the last couple of days, so there's a lot going on.
Yeah, things did not go according to plan with the first implant, is the Neuralink news you're referring to.
Yeah, definitely not as well as they had hoped. Neuralink coming out in response to a Wall Street Journal report saying there had been some issues with the first implant, although the patient seems to be able to use it at least to some extent, despite these challenges.
Okay, we'll get to that in just a second, but I want to start with sort of a big overarching question about Elon Musk and AI, because this is something that he's talked about for years. It's something he's thought about for years. He's made investments toward AI for years. How would you describe his philosophy on AI?
Yeah, well, Elon Musk actually was kind of ahead of the curve on this. He has been talking for pretty much a decade about this idea of risk posed by AI. Now, the idea that maybe we'll develop some computers that are so powerful they will, take over the world and destroy us. That idea is sort of hot in some tech circles. It was behind, to some extent at least, the coup at OpenAI. Elon Musk is at the front of that. He co-founded OpenAI and has really used AI in Tesla at developing its driverless car program, which of course the company has been pivoting to over the last few months.
Well, right. It's somebody who's actually putting it to work, right?
Yes, yeah. The idea with Tesla's AI thing is that, the EV business is pretty bad, and robo-taxis obviously is a huge, fast, as Elon Musk sees it anyway, very promising business. Of course, a lot of criticism of that from other corners.
But Max, he's also talked a lot in the past about how scared we should be of the robots taking over, like Terminator 2 style.
Yes, Terminator 2 style. That is what he says. I think there are a lot of experts, a lot of people in the AI field who would quibble with that, who would say, the bigger risk is that the technology doesn't work. But Elon Musk, big reader of science fiction, this is a trope that has come up in a lot of science fiction. And it was, despite the crazy success of OpenAI, the commercial success of OpenAI, this fear was actually part of the beginning of that company. The original, if you go back to 2015, what Sam Altman and Elon Musk were saying was, we are going to make a good AI, and the reason you should trust us is because we're good. We're going to commercialize as quick as possible and beat out some of the more self-interested actors. Now, whether you take that seriously or not, I think is an open question, but that is at least the stated ideology.
I keep repeating this, and Tim's going to roll his eyes, but Elon Musk was at Milken this week. Didn't talk about Tesla, but talked about a lot of stuff. But he did talk about AI in particular and kept making the point of, it's got to be taught not to lie. It's got to be truthful. Very important to have maximum truth-seeking AI and maximum curious AI. You know, so it sounds like, yeah, I get it. That's what we want. How do you?
So he has made versions of that point before. That was a curious interview. I mean, if you watched it, you saw Michael Milken essentially read a series of statements that Elon Musk has made and then ask Elon Musk, do you agree with that? And Elon Musk said, would you believe this? Yes, I agree with it.
Like that Elon Musk guy, he's pretty smart.
Yeah, and so he brought up this point about AI that should be truthful, that should not be politically correct. That's been a big thing for him. It's been a sort of vector of criticism, not just from Elon Musk, but players on the right. There was also an interesting moment in that panel where Michael Milken asked him about SpaceX. Do you use AI in SpaceX? And he said, no. And then he said that the reason I don't use it is because the AI is very bad at questions of physics and so on. So it's sort of a weird, disjointed interview that on one hand might leave you, very bullish on AI, but in the very end, Elon Musk brought up, some of the challenges, which is like anyone who's in this space knows, but like the technology is not always 100% factual. And I guess we all run into that, in various ways.
Can we put the Musk AI projects that exist today, I'm not talking about the open AIs and the deep minds, I'm talking about the stuff that he's doing right now, XAI, Grok, can we put that stuff in the same level, in the same bucket as what Microsoft is doing, what OpenAI is doing, what Anthropic is doing?
XAI, I mean, in certain ways, it's a much smaller, much less mature company than OpenAI, and even than Anthropic, and some of these sort of they're not quite startups, but they're not quite big companies. XAI is very new. That said, XAI has its own model that is, at least in some sense, competitive with the model that OpenAI, the market leader, has. And I think for that reason, you need to take it seriously. The other reason you need to take it seriously is that Elon Musk, of course, he has his critics. He's a very controversial guy. But when it comes to recruiting technical talent, he is very good at it. People want to work for Elon Musk. Right. They are willing to accept some of the erratic behavior, some of the kind of crazy management tactics that he uses, because he is seen as a genius, as an entrepreneurial great, and people want that. And as long as he's able to maintain that, he's going to be able to recruit some of the best minds in this field, and he's been able to do that. And when you look at the performance of Grok, I mean, it's kind of goofy sometimes. It sort of has an unfunny sense of humor, at least to my taste, but it is competing with OpenAI, and it has another advantage, which is access to Twitter, the company formerly known as Twitter, which is a really great repository of real-time information, and that is something that the other companies do not have.
One of the other things that came up at Milken, and it was interesting to see, like, more than most, right? Like, he's just got so many different properties, whether it's SpaceX, whether it's Starlink. And that was one of the things he seemed to say, how it could be the great leveler in terms of providing internet connectivity around the world, and the importance of education, that there's so much online that, like in the emerging world, that Starlink's going to help people in terms of education, and that's better for everybody going forward. But when you look at the Elon universe, Max, is Starlink a bright spot? I mean, or I don't know, like, how do you...
Starlink, I think, is a source of potential growth for SpaceX, Elon Musk's rocket company. One of the challenges that SpaceX has is it builds so many rockets that it's not totally clear until there's funding to take humans to Mars, what is going to go in those rockets. And one answer to that, for all this rocket capacity that he has created, is Starlink. So Elon Musk has this sort of secondary business, which is shooting up these many satellites, more satellites really than have ever been put into space, into low Earth orbit, that are providing internet access. Now, this is much better, I'd say, than like the existing satellite internet companies. It's able to reach, again, parts of the world that are not well served. Right. The problem is this is a difficult business. Like rural internet, there's a reason a lot of telecoms don't want to invest in this area, because it's expensive, it's not clear who's going to pay for it. So I think there's a lot of potential there, but it's not totally clear what the business is. And I think that's one of the reasons, in addition to talking about education and leveling and access, all those things that Elon Musk brought up at the Milken conference, they are also quietly trying to sell the Defense Department and other, U.S. allies on the idea that Starlink is a potential military technology. Militaries could pay the company money to access these satellites as well.
Okay, so how are you thinking about a live taping of the Elon Inc. podcast? Because that's coming later today from the Bloomberg Tech Summit right here in San Francisco. Tell us a little bit about what you have planned.
Well, we're going to discuss all of this, and this will air again, in your podcast feed and on Bloomberg Radio a couple days later. We're going to discuss sort of the universe of Elon's AI efforts, kind of break them down with Business Week editor Brad Stone, and then we're going to have a little fun. I mentioned that Grok has kind of a unique sense of humor.
Unique is one way to describe
unique
it.
taste. So we're going to sort of look at a sort of side-by-side comparison of all the different idiosyncrasies of the different AI models, including Grok, but also, Google's model, OpenAI's model, and so on.
Also kind of a rare moment for you all to be together physically, those who take part in the Elon Inc. podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. There's always, especially in being here in San Francisco, center of the world for AI, and Elon Musk is a Texan these days, but this is really where he got started. So we do feel a certain connection to the material that we wouldn't otherwise in New York.
All right, so how many podcasts have you done so far for Elon Inc.?
I think this is our 33rd taping of the podcast. We do it once a week, sometimes twice a week when there's Elon news. And when we started this, we were a little concerned that can you really have a show entirely dedicated to Elon Musk? But the truth is, he is such a busy guy. He's, one of the world's richest people. He owns one of the world's biggest companies, major defense contractor, increasingly major political player. There's essentially always something to talk about just right now.
That's what I wanted to ask you. Is it that idea of when you go to do a podcast, it's okay, now where do we start? Because there's so much.
Yeah, that's a challenge. And also because Elon Musk can at times be sort of all over the place. On one hand, he's on X, the company formerly known as Twitter, sort of hosting weird right-wing memes. At the same time, he's running this very serious defense contractor that has close connections with the Biden administration. So, all the more reason to spend time talking about this, analyzing it, and doing reporting, which we're also doing well.
Does he have an open invitation to appear with you on the Elon Inc. podcast?
We have invited him many times, and we will continue to do so. Elon, if you are listening, would love to hear your thoughts.
Well, that's what I was going to say. If you actually, all right, he's joining you on the podcast, and you're like, Elon, great to have you here with us. First question.
I would ask him about what he thinks about electric vehicles right now, because over the last few months, he has really focused on robo-taxis and AI, all these very trendy topics. And I think many people who were big fans of Tesla from a clean technology perspective have felt a sense of betrayal, a sense that he is kind of turning his attention away from what was the core of the company. And during the last earnings call, a couple of analysts asked him questions about this. He kind of ducked the question. He said, we've said all we're going to say about this. So I think really understanding where does Tesla want to be? Does Tesla want to sell low-price electric cars, or does it want to be a robotaxi company?
What do you think it wants to do?
I mean, I think he wants both, but I think at the moment he's going where the money is, and the money is robotaxis.
I mean, one thing that has struck me is the way that he's talking about these robotaxis has changed a little bit in recent weeks, given he's talked about them since 2018, but now there's a date in August when he's supposedly going to unveil this thing. It's happened before. Overpromise, underdeliver. Is this time different?
I mean, the thing is, what he has talked about, it doesn't just require a huge technological leap forward that no one, not Waymo, Cruise, the companies that Elon Musk would be competing with, have achieved. It also will require an enormous regulatory lift. And it's there where he has done, as far as I can tell, and maybe there's a lot of stuff happening in secret, but he has done very little.
That's a good point.
They are not there. We're going to have to rewrite a whole bunch of laws, get a lot of people comfortable with a very new technology that may or may not exist yet. There are many reasons why this is going to be difficult.
Have you seen the Waymos driving around? The driverless Waymos here? I see them. Okay.
Have you?
Yeah, they're all over. No driver, passengers. They're driving around. Yeah.
It can
in
happen.
Arizona too.
Yeah, but I mean these Waymo vehicles, which we see in San Francisco. Again, it required basically 15 years of very difficult work and lobbying and huge amounts of money. And, of course, you can make an argument, okay, maybe that was inefficient, maybe Google moved slowly. Critics, including Elon Musk, I'm sure would say that. But if you're a Waymo, you're going to say, listen, Elon, it's going to take you a lot longer than you think. and we have the, you know, the receipts to prove it.
You're not always wrong. It's just timing and how long sometimes things take to happen. Max Chafkin, thank you so much. Smack in the middle of all things Elon and so much more. Bloomberg Business Week columnist. Thank you so much. Good luck with the podcast.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
Really
Max, also the author of The Contrarian, Peter Thiel and Silicon Valley's Pursuit of Power. He's here at the Bloomberg Tech Summit. Got to tell you, Carol, walk out of my hotel room this morning, go down to the lobby. You know who's there on the couch doing work?
Who?
Max Chafkin.
I don't think
get
he
to sit down.
stops.
I get to sit down with Max in the morning.
Was it his digital twin? Maybe.
No, it was really the real life.
He needs a digital twin, is what he needs.
Yeah.
Max, thank you so much. No, it's really fascinating. You talk about Waymo and stuff. I mean, I have seen them in the past, and it's just, yeah. I mean, you think about how much in terms of adoption. Are we ready for it? I don't know.
I think that's a big part of it. I think what Max said about regulation is so important. The idea of Waymo's driving around
All
here
of it,
being
right?
15 years in the making. You have the governor of Arizona, who's been very friendly to this stuff. For Uber, for Waymo. That's why people always talk about, okay, when I was on vacation in Arizona, I saw all these driverless cars, but you don't see them anywhere else at this point. So I don't see widespread adoption of a Tesla robotaxi happening in any of these places that doesn't
Maybe he wants to
have
take
these
them
things
to
already.
Mars. It would be easier to kind of get them
There
out
is
and
already a
about.
Tesla Roadster orbiting right now as a result of a SpaceX launch. So
All I would say.
careful what you wish for.
All I would say is that when it comes to, you know, I still think about the EV space, and you would have talked to the traditional automakers, and they would have said it's going to take us a long time to make this shift. Elon Musk comes into the world, and we're like, okay, no, we can do this much more quickly and do it differently.
Can you do it?
I don't know.
Like Reid Hoffman said, they might disagree politically, but he's responsible for what happened with EVs, for what happened with SpaceX, and the way that we're seeing space exploration.
We're going to tell Max, you can go.
Oh, yeah.
He's giving me the sign that I can't go.
Oh, you're good to go.
You're good.
No, you're good to go. Sorry.
No, we know
You're good.
you've got stuff going on, but we're still live, aren't we?
Yeah, we're still live.
We're still live.
But Max, the reason Max has to go is because he's got a big panel coming up.
Well, he's also got that. He's got the podcast coming up. We didn't want to keep him because we know he's got a full thing.
Poor Max.
No,
We're
don't
having
be
Max.
sorry.
He's sitting here like being so
It's fun
obedient
about live.
and kind to us. Max Chafkin, everybody. Thank you, Max. See you later.
Well, we're going to continue the conversations. No, but I really, it's interesting, and I do think about when they started the podcast, there was so much about, like, will there be enough when it comes to all things Elon? And it really is fascinating every day that we come in and the reading that there's so much happening.
Yeah, I'm just looking ahead about what we have coming up because we got some great guests coming up on the other side. We're on air.
We're actually live right now.
That's okay.
Guys, it's a little hectic. It's really frenetic, but it's a lot of fun, a lot of energy, and smart conversations. We're going to continue. And I don't know. Hey, we're still on air.
It's okay. It's very loud here. You can hear all the panels that are happening.
Well, we're gonna
we got
get
Tom
into-
Giles, the Senior Executive Editor of Global Technology, up right now.
And the ones to watch, we're going to bring you some of those folks that has to be on your radar. Be patient with us. We've got a great crew. We're trying to get it done for you. It's really fascinating conversation. TradeMasters, Tim Stenbeck for Bloomberg Business Week. And we're live.
It's 4:21 on Wall Street. We do check markets all day long here at Bloomberg. I'm Charlie Pellet. U.S. stock market now at the highest since early April, extending a rebound that has been fueled by speculation the Federal Reserve will be able to cut rates this year. S&P ending the session at 52.14, up 26 points today, up by about 0.5% so far this year. We've got the S&P up 9.3%. The Dow up 331, up by 0.8%. While NASDAQ was up 43, higher by 0.3%. 10-year yield 4.45%, the 2-year 4.81%, gold up 1.6%, 23.46 the ounce, and West Texas Intermediate crude up 0.8%, 79.62 for a barrel of WTI. Designer and retailer Tapestry cut its revenue outlook for the remainder of the year after a sales decline in North America signaled weak demand from consumers in the U.S., its top market. Tapestry's brands include Coach and Kate Spade. Shares today were up by 3.6%. Recapping, stocks higher, S&P at 52.14, up 0.5%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
So any other pro tips?
All right, everybody. Well, welcome back. Bloomberg Business Week. Carol Master, Tim Stanovic, live here in San Francisco at the Bloomberg Technology Summit. Well, the new issue of Bloomberg Business Week, it is out on newsstands, online, and on the Bloomberg. And there's a very special section. It's about the folks to watch, the ones to watch is what we call it. It's the section. And these aren't Tim necessarily, the Tim Cooks, the Sam Altmans, the Jensen Wongs, the Lisa Su's. In other words, they aren't household names, at least not yet. And that's where we want to get to. They are startup founders, they're big tech managers, they're low-key investors, even a bureaucrat who could play a bigger role than you realize in shaping our future. This is why they are the ones to watch.
And we got a couple of them with us here right now, on site at the Bloomberg Technology Summit. Tushar Ahluwalia is a co-founder and CEO of Razor Group. It's an Amazon aggregator that's backed by the private equity arm of Bernard Arnault, the world's richest man. And Evan Reiser, co-founder and CEO of Abnormal Security, calls itself a precision human behavior security engine that protects the cloud office from email attacks. Evan, Tushar, good to have you with us.
Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. I want to start with you and just give us an idea. What is an Amazon aggregator?
Okay, well, our company started in sort of the 2021 capital boom, where we went out and started to acquire Amazon FBA businesses because those businesses...
Fulfilled by Amazon, FBA.
FBA stands for Fulfilled by Amazon.
Explain what that is to people.
These are essentially merchants on the Amazon platform that use Amazon's infrastructure to fulfill consumer goods to the end consumer. And FBA aggregators are companies that acquire these businesses and aggregate them. And that's sort of where our journey started. But I'd say since markets shifted roughly in 2022, the industry reoriented itself. And so we are very much now consolidating our peers. We're the largest in the ecosystem. We've acquired four of our peers. We acquired Perch Group, which was the second largest player in the US. We're a Berlin-based company. And as we look to the future of Razor Group, we see our future as the Western response to Temu, Chinese models like Temu and Shein. Right.
All right, so somebody comes up to you and says, okay, you're on this list, the ones to watch. Why should we be watching you?
Sorry?
Somebody comes up to you and says, okay, you're on this list, the ones to watch, right? Like, these are the visionaries for the future. What do you say? Why are you one of the companies to watch?
I think, what we'll bring to Western consumer markets is the concept of C2M, which is consumer to manufacturer. So our ability to,
which is a whole different way of thinking about things.
It's a very, very different way to think about consumer. And so we believe the supply chain in consumer is something that traditionally did not get so much love by the tech environment and tech companies. And so techifying supply chains leading up to Western consumer markets is something that we'll focus on with hyper-fast product innovation cycles, really consumer goods of the future. And so I hope, we'll be known for building and creating and crafting consumer products at scale in relevant categories, for tomorrow's consumer.
Evan Reiser, come on in here and talk a little bit about what you do over at Abnormal Security. We should note that 15% of the Fortune 500 companies are among the customers. You have about 2,000 of them. You've raised $300 million from investors, valued at $4 billion. it's not just like I was trying to describe it in this intro. It's not like a typical like cybersecurity firm. Explain why it's different.
That's right. So at Normal Security, we're a behavioral platform to help.
What does that mean, behavioral platform?
So we stop the cybersecurity attacks you know about, phishing, fraud, social engineering. The approach is fundamentally different. We're looking at human behavior, trying to understand the normal patterns of behavior and look for anomalies. And that's very effective for stopping attacks that have never been seen before, which is why after being in the market for 5 years, we already have 1 out of 5 Fortune 500 organizations as customers.
It's a whole different way of looking at it. So talk to us about the kind of behavior that you guys are picking up on.
Yeah, so conventional security is focused on known bad stuff.
Right.
Right? And if you know every attack that's ever happened, you can stop a lot. But you can't stop the next thing. And it's those new things that cause the most damage. So rather than looking at bad stuff, right, IP addresses, URLs, email addresses that are known to be bad, what we do is try to really understand known good. We look at the patterns of behavior in business. So when we email each other, we might talk very casually, right, and not formally, right, or use different types of language or tone or personality. So by integrating into enterprise environments, we can build a baseline model of how people work, who they talk to, their relationships, their personality. Then when we see deviations or abnormalities from that, we then can use that as a basis for stopping crime.
You know, I feel like in the financial community, they think about that a lot, right? In analyzing, the regulatory environment and overseeing like emails and the way people communicate to pick up on a trend in terms of either fraud or something going astray.
That's right. If you look at how fraud is stopped, right, in the financial services, that's a behavioral-based approach. If my credit card gets swiped in Brazil for $10,000 at Starbucks, every banking system would say, that just doesn't look right. That's not how cybersecurity works, and that's the approach we take for stopping sophisticated types of phishing, fraud, social engineering malware. I think that's a new approach.
So I'll steal Carol's question, Evan. If somebody comes up to you and says, "Okay, you're on the ones to watch list. Why should I watch you?" What would you say?
I think it's everybody in 2024 is an AI company, obviously, right? My background's in behavioral ad targeting. We actually are an AI company, and we do that by deeply understanding people using the same technologies, behavioral ad targeting, and that powers kind of a new generation of cybersecurity products that are very different than 99% of what we see in the market today. So we have a revolutionary approach. It's an order of magnitude more effective at stopping attacks. It's a new approach for cybercrime. I think that's really important because cybercrime is going in the wrong direction when every chart is up and to the right. And I think a lot of customers are frustrated. They feel, I've never spent so much money on fighting crime, yet it's never been worse. And that is a trend, I think, as a civilization, we have to get going the other direction. And so we hope to play a big role in that.
Just got about a couple minutes left. Tushar, I want to go back to you. And you think about what's going on kind of in the world technologically. And obviously, so many of the conversations go back to artificial intelligence.
Yeah.
I get it. But what's interesting to you in terms of the tech environment right now?
I think AI is a big topic for us as well. I think there are many use cases in our workflows and how we work, with partners on the supply chain. Things that information is very fragmented, in the back end of our operations. And so streamlining that information, structuring that information is where AI can come in and just, accelerate, how we deliver consumer products to Western markets.
One thing I want to ask you, though, going back to, I'm fascinated by consumer to manufacturing. I meant to ask you this. Is it going to make things cheaper?
Hopefully, I think, what we want to do is bring back product IP from China back to the West. And so as we think about ESG compliant supply chains, as we think about, I'd say more value, not, cheaper price. So more differentiated, more customer-loved products than necessarily cheaper products. And that's certainly what we...
Cheaper, but less expensive. I'm thinking in an inflationary environment, are there ways to streamline things in terms of costs?
Yeah.
So I was thinking, in terms of in an inflationary environment, are there ways to kind of streamline costs a little bit?
Yeah. Possibly.
Possibly. Yeah. No, it's just interesting.
Hey, Evan, oftentimes when we talk to guys like you, we are interested in what you're seeing from your customers in terms of spend. You're in growth mode right now, but I'm wondering what you're seeing in terms of IT spend, if you can tell us anything about if it's going up, if you're seeing companies say, wait a second, we're spending too much money overall, we need to move our budgets a little bit like this. What can you tell us?
Yeah, that's a great question. So just for context, I talk to 10 CIOs or CISOs in Global 2000 every week. So I not only my view, I'll just repeat back what I hear kind of aggregate. So I'd say if you go back 2 or 3 years, IT budgets are growing 10 to 12%, cybersecurity budget growing 20% year over year. And it was a mode where if a new problem came up, you could buy a new point solution, and you keep kind of adding more and more stuff. In the last 2 years, that's changed a lot, right? The macros changed. People are now really reducing their budgets. It's probably, my guess this year is probably more like 5% growth. It's not negative or zero. That's driving both a lot of platform consolidation. People are tired of buying individual point solutions for security and software, and they're looking for larger platforms that do a lot more. And so I think people are still investing, and they have to because crime is going up, not down. But they're really struggling to manage all these solutions with a growing labor shortage of cybersecurity talent.
All right, just got 40 seconds, 20 seconds. Who's a tech leader that you follow and you think that everybody should keep an eye on real quickly?
I follow many, but right now I love Vinod Khosla, who I was able to meet just here today, which made me very happy.
Yeah,
I'm a fan.
Yeah, it's someone who's been in the industry and seen a lot of trends. How about for you? 20 seconds, Evan.
So one of my role models is Frank Slootman, former CEO of Snowflake. I just appreciate his customer focus and the culture that he's built across ServiceNow and Snowflake, and the organization to be a part of.
Well, listen, we really appreciate getting some time. As we said, you're part of the ones to watch. Tushar Ahluwalia, he is, of course, co-founder and CEO of the Razor Group, and Evan Reiser, co-founder and CEO of Abnormal Security. Guys, thank you so much. Good luck with everything.
Thank you so much.
So appreciate it.
Well, on the main stage right now, we have Steve Huffman, the co-founder and CEO of Reddit. You can watch him on Live Go on the Bloomberg terminal. Let's go now from San Francisco to Washington, D.C. for a check of the latest world and national news, where we find Amy Morris. Hey, Amy.
Hi, Tim. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says his country will stand alone if it has to in its war against Hamas, threatening to deepen a crisis in relations with the U.S. This after President Biden warned he'll stop additional shipments of offensive weapons to Israel if the country goes ahead with the ground invasion of Rafah. Now, the Pentagon's Major General Pat Ryder says the shipment of 3,500 bombs was already halted.
We've not made a final determination on how to proceed with the shipment, not going to get into hypotheticals. Again, we've been very clear on our views as it relates to Rafah and any ground operations there.
President Biden says he's concerned about the million-plus civilians sheltering in Rafah with nowhere to go. Senate Republicans are slamming President Biden over the decision to halt the arms shipments. South Carolina Senator Lindsey Graham says the move would worsen the conflict in the region, aid Hamas, and embolden Iran. A handful of Republican senators, including Graham and Texas Senator Ted Cruz, are introducing a resolution condemning the decision. Democrat Chris Van Hollen says the move will not embolden Israel's enemies, but will help avoid an even larger humanitarian crisis. The judge in Donald Trump's criminal hush money case let the jury go home just a little early today so he could hear arguments from Trump's attorney about the testimony of adult film actor Stormy Daniels. Daniels spent 2 days on the witness stand explaining her relationship with Trump, sometimes in salacious detail. Trump's attorneys are arguing that some of her testimony was irrelevant to the case and was only to inflame the jury and is grounds for a mistrial. They're also arguing to prevent the testimony of former Playboy model Karen McDougal. The judge, meanwhile, has just now denied Trump's request to modify the gag order. We will continue to follow this for you. They'll be back tomorrow. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Amy Morris, and this is Bloomberg.
4:40 on Wall Street. We do check markets all day long here at Bloomberg. S&P 500 index back above 5,200, 52.14 right now, a gain of 0.5%. The Dow today up 331, up 0.8%, while the Nasdaq Composite Index was up 43, a gain of just about 0.3%. 10-year 4.45%, the 2-year 4.81%. Gold surged $36 the ounce to $23.45, up 1.6%, and West Texas Intermediate crude up 0.7%, 79.57 for a barrel of WTI. So the U.S. stock market climbing to its highest since early April, extending a rebound that has been fueled by speculation the Fed will be able to cut rates this year. As for the outlook for rate cuts, Amanda Agati is Chief Investment Officer at PNC Asset Management, and she was a guest right here on Bloomberg Business Week.
I think market-based expectations are now down to no more than one cut this year. We're still hanging on to 2, likely in July and then towards the end of the year. But as additional data comes in, I think that view is certainly subject to change. I think the risk of cutting too soon is much bigger than pausing and waiting a few more months. Amanda Agati of PNC Asset Management. A big move to the downside today for gaming giant Roblox. Its stock plunged 22% after it reported a bookings forecast that fell short of analyst estimates for the second quarter. Again, recapping, stocks higher. S&P up 26, up 0.5%. I'm Charlie Pellet, and that is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
I would love to be a fly on the wall.
Thank you so much for that update, Charlie Pellet. Really do appreciate it. Lots of news when it comes to space exploration this week. Boeing, the long-delayed Starliner capsule was set to launch on Monday, but that's been pushed to at least May 17th, so another big setback there. Also, SpaceX, the company makes Starlink connectivity to Botswana. Just a couple headlines.
There's so much going on, and this is why Bloomberg is launching a new vertical. It's a Bloomberg space vertical, to be specific. It's all about the growing space economy, and we just do a little bit of a shameless plug, not so shameless, if you will, but if you want to get more about everything involved in the space industry, go to bloomberg.com/space. We have 2 great voices on it, so let's get to it. Lauren Grush is with us. She's Bloomberg News space reporter, also the author of The Six, the untold story of America's first women astronauts. She joins us on site here at the Bloomberg Tech Summit. Also with us is Cam Gatharian. He's co-founder and executive chairman at Quantum Space, also at Intuitive Machines, the first company to land on the moon. He's also co-founder and chairman Axiom Space, which sends private astronauts to the ISS, International Space Station. So great to have you 2 here with us. I got to say, my dad was an aeronautical engineer. I grew up, he was involved in the first moon landing, so we grew up loving space. But Cam, I want to start with you. Why do you love space so much?
You know, since childhood, I really, since 6-year-old, I would look at the stars and I would be mesmerized by them and would like, is it possible that people are living there, how far they are, how vast is the universe? It was just like, as a kid, was so curious and just wanted to explore. And then when I was 11, I saw Neil Armstrong landing on the surface of the moon. I was like, oh my God, we can actually go to another space body and land there. And it was like a transformational moment and really defined my career, you know, after graduating my degree. Then I joined the space program, and I have over 40 years of supporting all kinds of different missions with NASA and, of course, my own companies.
It's so interesting that you talk about the private sector, the public sector so much, but you're so focused right now on what you're doing in the private sector, and you've been so successful in the private sector. How would you describe the role of the public sector right now when it comes to space versus what it was when you saw Neil Armstrong land on the moon when you were 11 years old?
Yeah, it's really has changed dramatically. The best way I could tell you is that it used to be centralized. And centralized, like everything was under NASA. And then you had contractors that NASA did think for NASA, but ultimately was NASA property, right? The best way to describe it is that NASA was the landlord. Now NASA wants to be a tenant, and they're buying services from different companies like SpaceX, like Axiom Space, like Intuitive Machines, like Quantum Space. And it's not only NASA, but also I think Space Force, right? They're doing the similar thing. So And then public-private partnership has grown a lot, where in each of these, you got a public partner, private partner, and together we're trying to achieve something amazing. I mean, the intuitive machines, when we landed on the moon, I mean, we had NASA people right there along with us, partners. Right. We did it together.
Lauren, I want to bring you in. Go ahead. No, you were going to jump in.
Well, I was just going to say, from a coverage perspective, it also keeps me on my toes as a space reporter, because I think during the shuttle era, NASA was really the only game in town when it came to, pushing the envelope for space exploration. But now, because there is this new focus on NASA stimulating the commercial space economy, there's all these startups that are coming online to see if they can, generate a profit from the space industry. I mean, look at, they're trying to emulate the success of SpaceX. And so now I'm constantly busy covering all sorts of, new efforts, covering moon landings every week, or, covering new space stations that are launching. Like, it's a very exciting time to be covering.
Well, when you've got someone like Cam in the chair, like, what is it that you want to know from him when you think about, like, where do we go next when it comes to space exploration?
Well, I think when it comes to, there's a lot of optimism in space, obviously, and it's a very aspirational industry, right? I mean, it's hard not to get excited when you think about humans walking on the moon again, but I think what really I'm curious about it, and from a journalist perspective, is how is it sustainable? How are we going to make money off of it? Because the problem we have with space is that it's a very capital-intensive industry up front, and it takes a very long time to develop these technologies, and then it's a bit of a risk and it's a bit of a gamble to see if that'll actually play out into a viable business. But we're really at the very early stages of a lot of these startups, so it'll be interesting to follow along as they start to mature their technologies and to see if this is something that can sustain over a long period of time.
So let me steal Lauren's question, because she's the smartest person I know when it comes to everything regarding space, Cam. How do you make it sustainable? I mean, I think Elon Musk did a lot when he made the rockets reusable. That's huge in terms of sustainability. But how do you make it less capital intensive? How do you make it more sustainable?
Yeah, so I mean, if you think about Elon Musk, right? One thing he noticed was, wow, the cost of transportation is very high. Can I come up with a disruptive technology? Well, I can reduce the cost of transportation. But actually, maybe 2/3 of the value of SpaceX, maybe more, is related to the Starlink rather than the rocket industry. But rocket industry sort of enabled for Starlink to flourish. Okay, so now think about Axiom Space the same way. CapEx heavy, we're going to launch our module. So it's not that early thing, but if we can do manufacturing in space, like printing corneas and retinas, or let's say do fiber optics manufacturing, data centers, all of those new things, a new economy when we can create in microgravity, that's sort of our Starlink.
Well, right now, I want space exploration so we can go somewhere where it's a little bit quieter. But having said that, did you want to follow?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask Lauren very briefly. Shameless plug for what you guys are doing in the space vertical today. Explain to us why now is the right time to launch this new vertical.
Well, like as I said earlier, it might have, I wouldn't say that it used to be boring for space, but it definitely was very centralized, as Cam explained. And now, we're predicting that there's going to be, the global space economy is going to be over $1 trillion in the next decade. I mean, there's so much investment pouring into this industry, and there's all sorts of startups that are trying to mimic SpaceX's success, that there's, a wide array of different businesses, from, repairing satellites in orbit, sending things to the moon, commercial space stations, private tourist missions. There's all sorts of ways that companies are trying to make money, and it's just the perfect time to cover.
Cam, just to wrap up, 20 seconds, why is it so important that we've got to be focused on space?
Say it again?
Why is it so important? 20 seconds left. We have to focus on space as an investment audience.
Space is so vast. Just think about in our galaxy alone, there are 400 billion stars, and there are 2 trillion galaxies. We're such a small part. Space is limitless, it's infinite. And we're just such a small part of it. I think it's the world, it's the unknown world that we're going to explore, and new economies that are going to be created.
Just think about what we're going to discover. Cam, Lauren, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Lauren Grush is Bloomberg News space reporter. As we mentioned, she's the author of The Untold Story of America's First Women Astronauts.
It's an awesome book.
It's an awesome
Check it out. Everybody go read it. Go buy it. Written by our colleague, Lauren Grush.
And Cam Gafarian, he's co-founder and executive chair at Quantum Space. We mentioned also at Intuitive Machines, the first company to land on the moon, also co-founder and chairman of Axiom Space. They send private astronauts to the International Space Station. As I said, I grew up, I'm a large family, but my dad, part of the 60s, the great space race, and so understanding to have a nation, focused on having that happen. But there was so much science, so much we learned about the public, focus in terms of getting someone into space on the moon. So you do wonder kind of where this next chapter takes us.
And that's what I love about today is it's so easy. My son was actually asking questions. He's 5 years old. He's asking questions about how rockets get to the moon. You just fire up the internet and you can show him a SpaceX launch. And it's so awesome to be able to expose kids to that stuff.
Well, gotta say, I am, we're gonna switch gears. Our last guest, hello, we're getting him settled. Just back from Milken, and we talked a little bit about the deal-making environment. It's been slow, but IPOs do happen. And Reddit, of course, having its IPO this year.
Steve Huffman, of course, is co-founder and CEO of Reddit. He joins us here live at the Bloomberg Tech Conference. Earlier this week, I was covering your earnings, and the first earnings that you guys had as a publicly traded company. You guys just knocked it out of the park.
We had a nice quarter. We're happy with it. Revenue 48%, users 37%. I think it's a great way to start. I think we're pretty happy with it.
What was it that worked well for you for the quarter?
Well, like the way I've been describing it to folks is our work is working. And so this has been a multi-year effort of making Reddit, like it's easy to say, easier to use, faster, easier to sign up, easier to find your home, and it's paying off.
We should know, when you say multi-year, you don't just mean like a couple of years. I mean, Reddit is like a company that is almost as old as Facebook at this point, and it was a much longer path to an IPO.
So we started the company in 2005. I mean, and we've had a journey, right? We sold the company, it spun out, I left, I came back. I'd say really the kind of modern era of Reddit started in 2015. That's when I came back. But it was really a couple of years ago where I told the company, I was like, we need to quit being so academic about our work and just make Reddit better. Just focus on quality.
Well, so talk to us a little bit about how you do and continue to make it better. There was a quote, I think, on the earnings about you saying building the next generation of Reddit. So how do you think about that, Steve, in a world where we are talking a lot about AI? We know the data that you guys have on your platforms, it's smart data, it's targeted data. What is the next generation of Reddit? What does that really mean?
So Reddit is people, right? People create community, they have incredible conversations. So really what we're doing is revealing that. Now, as it happens, people, our users, but any people really, they have, I think, a deep down need for community and a sense of belonging, and that's what we provide. Now, at the same time, these conversations they're having are totally unique on the internet. And so where increasingly more and more content online is written by AI, is written by machines, there's a premium now on content that's made by humans, or it comes from humans. And I think people have a craving increasingly for that realness as well.
I'm wondering about the content policy that you guys rolled out today, because the whole idea here is to create a place for Reddit content to actually help train AI models. You have a deal right now out there with Alphabet's Google to help it train its AI models. What works about Reddit's content, and how do you balance that with making sure that the people who contribute there feel like they're not contributing to developing an AI algorithm?
So Reddit has been open for a long time, and we love that about Reddit. And we've been very well indexed in search, in Google search, for example. And I think of AI, the AIs that we've seen, as like Search 2.0. And so it's important for us, or we like Reddit being out there and our content being out there. It helps users find their home on Reddit. It helps people get answers to questions. I think this is very powerful. But what we announced this morning is that we can't just be completely permissive. We have to be very picky about who we work with. And we're going to work with partners like Google who will do so on our terms, right? Not reverse engineer the identity of our users, not try to use public content on Reddit to target ads or things like that, but really use it for what it's intended for, which is advancing the state of the art and helping people find their home on Reddit.
It does feel like we're going into a new generation, maybe a more informed generation, if you will, when it comes to the social media world. Is that fair after seeing some of the stumbles of kind of the first round, if you will?
So the way I think about this ecosystem...
And I'm not just saying Reddit, I'm just talking more broadly social media.
Sure. Well, so Reddit... remember, we started in 2005, so we actually predate the word social media and the idea of influencers.
There was a time when that happened.
Yeah, and so I feel like we're kind of going through this evolution where Reddit's becoming more mainstream, and increasingly people who maybe have grown up with social media are seeing that, hey, there's another way, and this might be a better way or a better fit for them, right? Because Reddit is free of a lot of the, I think, incentives or misincentives that cause people to behave unnaturally. Like on Reddit, people just help each other, and you don't get credit for it in real life. So the only reason you do it is because you enjoy doing it, and I think that's really special.
Yeah, I feel like I'm actually so late to the party. I've talked about this. I talked about this
He's been
during
obsessed.
IPO.
I can't tell you every time he talks about it on
I'm not a young person, and like I basically feel like I just discovered Reddit, and it's probably the platform that I spend the most time on. It has communities for, I'm a cyclist, I live in a certain part of New York, like I can follow all of these communities, and it's super helpful too with like home improvement stuff. I'm finding it. How do you get more people like me to find it sort of later in their...
Hey, you're doing your part.
I am, but I feel like my brothers are like, yeah, this has been around forever.
Is he too old in terms of demographics?
Well, so this is the funny thing about our demographics, that we're actually, what we're seeing is people age out of social media and they age into Reddit. And so we tend to pick people up, we call them emerging adults, maybe in their early 20s, late teenage. The peak of the bell curve is maybe 25, but I've increasingly seen 60 and 70-year-olds on Reddit. The way I describe it is whatever you're into or going through, just in life, it's on Reddit somewhere. It's just people. And so, yeah, I think the platform is a little older.
Well, something that you've brought up a lot lately is the idea of when you're Googling something, you actually find Reddit answers in Google. How big of a traffic driver is that to you?
It's a big one.
Like how big?
It's come and gone. It's come and gone over the years, but we've been seeing more traffic from Google because we made the website much faster, and Google likes speed. So faster website, rank higher, and then again, I think there's been this secular shift towards people want to hear from other real people, and that's what we provide. And I think Google's pretty good just as a search engine of figuring out what are people actually looking for. It happens to be Reddit right now.
What's it like to come back to the company?
So it was 9 years ago. When I came back to Reddit, it was going through a difficult time. But look, I love Reddit so much. I think Reddit is so important and the opportunity is so big that, honestly, it's my dream job. I feel so thankful to have this job and to have had it twice, once the first time and having come back. It's sometimes I just kind of pinch myself. I feel so incredibly fortunate.
And being a publicly held company.
I think IPOing it's a big milestone, but I've likened it to getting married. A lot of planning, a big special moment, but we went out on a Thursday, and on Monday it's like, okay,
go to work.
Back to work. Where do you see yourself fitting in the social media ecosystem? Is it, you have TikTok, you have Meta platforms, which owns Instagram. You have YouTube, they just dominate. Where do you fit in?
We've been doing our own thing for such a long time. If you were to look at our traffic, you would not see the rise or fall of any other social media platform. And so we've kind of grown up in our own image. We like the way we do things. And what we're seeing is that people increasingly just appreciate the Reddit way versus maybe what you'd find somewhere else.
The biggest challenge for you guys going forward, what do you see that as?
So I think it's similar to that last question, staying true to our values and the way we do things. And so I often remind the company, we're here for a reason. We get to survive because we've done things the Reddit way. And it means sometimes we've maybe not grown as fast as we could have because we said, hey, that doesn't fit the way we do things. And so I think we have to take pressure to grow and pressure to do things this or that, and just filter them through, well, how does it fit Reddit? And how do we make sure we stay true to ourselves?
Yeah, which can be tough as a publicly held company, as you know.
It can be tough, but I think we're ready for it.
Listen, Steve Huffman, you are ending our show and our coverage here and just on a high point. So thank you so much and good luck with everything.
Thank you. Thank you. I really appreciate it.
Steve Huffman, the co-founder, of course, and CEO of Reddit. That's a wrap, guys. Bloomberg Business Week finishing up here at the Bloomberg Technology Summit in San Francisco. Some really smart conversations.